the natural length of, let's take the big numbers, 3 meters. By the way, significant figures, I hate them, so I'm not bothering. If you are a significant figure fan, go for it.
I just use engineering notation.
Okay. Spring with natural length of 3 meters. A 2 kilogram mass is added to the end. And the spring is back in equilibrium. With a length. Wow, my handwriting is getting worse and worse as I go here. Of, let's see, 7 meters. What is the spring constant? That's a 7. All right, so generally recommend drawing a picture when you're starting out. So a spring with a natural length, and I know that this is 3 meters because the problem says so. And then a 2 kilogram mass is added. It is in equilibrium again. Not to scale. It's a 2 kilogram mass. And the spring is now 7 meters. We'll plug it into the equation there. What is the force? So if we think about the forces acting on this mass right here.
Gravity. Or force caused by gravity.
Thank you for that, for the correction.
9.8 meters per second squared.
Times 2 kilograms.
Depends on what you do with it.
Times 2 kilograms, which
Okay.
is 19.6.
Oh.
So this is, the force due to gravity acting down on it, that is the weight. In this particular case, the formula in general.
Mass times gravity.
Mass times acceleration probably.
Thank you. Or you can just get away with just saying mg and I'm good. All right, so we have 2 kilograms times,
9.8 meters per second squared.
why 9.8 meters per second squared?
Because that's what gravity, that's what the acceleration due to gravity is.
Thank you for the correction. Is it always 9.8 meters per second squared?
It depends on mass.
That's
Like,
when we go higher.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
roughly the average on Earth.
yeah.
What is it in Winston-Salem?
It's slightly-
Kelly Sasson taught us.
Yeah, she told us that. I think it's like slight, like a decimal less. I can't remember the exact number.
9.798.
Yeah.
Okay.
They actually, I tried to find this information, and they've mapped almost the entire world at this point. Now, when I first saw that, I thought, oh great, there should be a site. I just type in the coordinates and it'll tell me exactly what it is, but no, at least I haven't found that. They basically did it, they flew over all parts of the world, and so basically, unless they flew over Winston-Salem doing this measurement, you have to sort of extrapolate. However, in the 70s, they were doing more specific study in Winston-Salem, and actually right on the hill over here, in the median, they actually had a measurement done. So fortunately, Winston-Salem, as part of a different study, did actually have a measurement. So 9.798 meters per second squared. So in labs, oftentimes, usually under notes, that tends to be my pattern. You'll see G equals, and then I give you a value that I would like you to use. Especially in labs, never use 9.81. I've seen students do this before because that's what they were taught. They got stuck in their head. 9.81 is meters per second squared for the Earth. And that 9.805 is closer to the average for the world, but 9.81, you're getting farther and farther away from here. All right, so therefore, what assumption was made?
That this is taking place on Earth.
Yeah, and oftentimes it's not spoken. If you ever, usually I write assume on a test, assume G equals 9.8 meters per second squared unless otherwise stated or implied. So I have given problems where the trick is it's not taking place on Earth. So just please be aware of that. Don't automatically assume. All right, so we get 19.6.
Newtons.
All right, what other forces are acting on this?
The spring.
Now the minus sign is already taken into account the fact that it's opposite the displacement, so it's upwards, and that's equal to K delta X. So we end up with, what is delta X anyway?
4 meters.
That's meters. 4.9.
I just said a little less than 5.
Yeah. Units.
There's no. It's a constant.
It has units though.
Kilograms per second squared.
Newton plus meter.
Yeah, you would both be right. Newtons per meter is generally how it's expressed. Now, if you're struggling with the units there, there's a simple enough way of dealing with it. So we had 19.6 newtons is equal to K times 4 meters. We're solving for K, so you divide both sides by 4 meters. That's the math problem right there, and those are the units right there. I will say that in terms of units, only 1 fraction bar per unit. And also the unit does need to be separate from this. If you gave me an answer of 19.6 newtons over 4 meters, I would not give you full credit for that. There'd be a minor deduction, but this is, if you were told, what is reduce the fraction, not bad example. If you were given 50 over 4 as a problem, and you said, well, the answer is 50 over 4, even though this is a true statement, I doubt if your elementary school teacher would have given you credit.
Wouldn't it be like a proper fraction? Is that,
Improper fraction?
well, that'd be an improper, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you'd want to reduce it to a proper fraction.
Well, you want to reduce it. I prefer improper fractions to mixed numbers if that's where you're going.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
It's 25.
I like decimal.
Yeah.
Are decimal numbers okay?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm fine with that too. I just find mixed numbers where you got the whole number and then the fraction is usually, there are a few occasions where it's convenient, but usually it's just inconvenient. There's nothing wrong with improper fractions. All right, questions to hear?
I think I'm getting this. You guys getting this?
No?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty straightforward.
They're on my calculator, so that's good.
My
I
battery's
got
done.
mine here as well.
I haven't used this since this.
Yeah, without a calculator, I kinda hope,
And that app drains my battery. Oh, yeah.
Even at the solar panel up.
What worked today?
So Now let's take another step. Apparently, not the right color. Let's see, the color's up here. Alright, so I have some sort of beam here. Think of it as a cylindrical rod that works. And I start pulling on it. What's going to happen to the rod?
Well, what's the material made out of?
Yeah, what's it made out of, and how much force is being applied?
Let's assume that it's a metal rod and the force applied is, I'm pulling on it with my arms.
And the
It's
forces
gonna
are
happen to
equal? Or
It's gonna
the forces have the same magnitude?
Yeah, assume that the forces are the same magnitude, even though I was thinking that it also, the fact that these F's are the same, I don't have different subscripts, would imply that. If the forces were not the same, what would happen to the rod?
It would accelerate.
All right, so I'm pulling on this rod like this. What would happen?
I can't.
Probably
Very
nothing,
slightly
if
expand.
it's metal.
It would slightly expand.
And
Yes, it would slightly expand. Whether it's expand enough to be noticeable, that's a different story. But it is going to expand. My brother-in-law was selling vacuum cleaners and there was a belt as part of it. He said, pull on that one. If you could actually stretch that thing, I'll give you a free vacuum cleaner. So I pulled on it and he said, see, you couldn't stretch it. And I immediately thinking of this and going, no, I stretched it.
You just can't see it.
That's right. So as I'm pulling on it, we have this thing called stress.
Is that the symbol for
Yes,
stress?
that's a sigma.
Sigma.
That's really not much better. It's an O with a flag on top. And so one of the measures that are done is you basically, it's the force divided by the area. And the area is the cross-sectional area. So this is. We also talked about the fact that it would stretch some, so we have, if this is some initial length L, so 0, and I pull on it and it stretches a little bit, then there's some change in the length. And so we have another word used in this, and this is called strain. Epsilon. Which is the change in length over the initial length.
Yeah, that looks like I can see where calculus is factors in with a lot of these things.
Yeah. Now we're gonna, for the most part, stay away from it. There's, however, when I say stress and strain, this is a reference to engineering stress, engineering strain. I'm not going to generally put the word engineering in front of it. And the reason why I talk about that is, as you're looking, if you look through other sources, and there's also true strain as well. The mathematics is a little bit different, and we're going to stick with the simpler one. But if you get into true strain, you start getting into, you have to do an antiderivative of dl over L and get natural logs, and I was going to avoid that. But if you do run across true stress and true strain, just recognize they are slightly different.
What would it be, let's see, would it be sort of, would it be accurate to say that true stress is sort of like the theoretical and engineering is more the practical?
Actually, no, I don't think it really applies. It's almost the flip of that. This is force divided by whatever that initial cross-sectional area is.
Oh.
But as you pull on it, that area is gonna change. And so true stress would deal with the area at that moment. I apply force and the area is different than it was initially.
Oh, okay.
And so this would be more like force over instantaneous acceleration. Wrong word. Instantaneous area.
Oh, I think I'm getting it now. Although the instantaneous thing is foreign to me at the moment, I don't remember that.
And I'll say, my undergraduate degree is mechanical engineering. I don't recall ever doing true stress to true strain. It's possible that, I don't remember it and we talked about it, or it's possible I just didn't pursue that line of engineering, so it didn't matter.
Yeah, I was in mechanical engineering before I shifted to mechatronics.
Okay.
Seems like something that you'd use at like the extreme end of a field rather than, like if you're designing a bridge, you probably don't care that much, but if you're designing a rocket, maybe it matters a little more.
Yeah, or generally if you're designing a bridge, you are building in so many safety factors or factors of safety that the thing is 10 times more than what you need.
So many codes you have to follow and everything. So many codes you have to follow.
Oh, absolutely. And if you're designing jet fighters, is obviously the one that you want that thing to be as fast as possible. Those have factors of safety of 1.0001. Yeah, then you're caring about this. So if I plotted stress versus strain, typically for a hard material, they're directly proportional up to a certain point, very similar to Hooke's law. And then it will start to change. And let's see if I can grab the prop real quick.
I'll shut that to out. We'll get,
Yeah, I was just making sure it's still there.
Hey, where's my kill at? Loop to loop.
Joaquin's no longer with us.
What are you talking about?
oh, no.
No, there's just one of our friends from other class.
Yeah.
Well,
No,
I forgot about that shit.
we didn't see him after spring.
Yeah, no.
You're gonna think I'm weird, but I was just sitting in my car going. So loud.
I forgot about that.
There we go. All right, so basic plastic ring, and yes, white background and a clear plastic. I'm assuming all of you have much better vision than I've got. All right, so as I pull on this, I'm applying, the stress is increasing because the force is increasing. Area is not changing significantly, but then again, we're dealing with the initial area. So force increases, and then it gets to a certain point where,
I cannot see.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just move over a bit, hopefully.
Maybe in front of the door.
Yeah, that'd be.
or we can share. Here,
That's
have some plastic.
This is a good solution.
Yeah, I'm seeing it. It's more gonna stretch too. No doubt, because of the.
Okay. Any germs on this are long dead, so. So as you pull on it, the length does increase, and so we're increasing the strain, and the stress is increasing because you're increasing the force. It gets to a certain point where you're going to pull on it, and the thing is not going to bounce back. While you're still in this region right here, it's going to bounce back to exactly the shape it was the first time.
Yeah, here's.
But at some point, you are going to get it, you're going to get it so it is not bouncing back. And so that is the elastic limit. Look at the,
This is good plastic.
I just reached that limit.
Yeah, I reached it too. Here's. This is.
once you get into this region, there is what's known as plastic deformation.
And that's what I did.
And that gap, and that ending point over there is when it just snaps.
Yeah, that's,
When it's no longer.
Breaking point?
let's see. Yeah, I was thinking that there was a more clever word to it, but it's the breaking point. This point right here is the ultimate strength. This right here, ultimate strength, is the amount, it's the stress at that point. This point right here is the yield strength. And even though it might not look like it, strength is spelled correctly here as an NG. And so this is sort of an ideal. Now, if you brought in true stress and true strain, it is going to look a little bit different. So if we did true and true, it's going to look more like that if you brought in true stress, true strain. Just as a side note.
The cross section is decreasing.
Now, if you pull it out, and let's say that you pull it to this point right here, you apply enough stress, enough force to have stress at that point. When you let go, this is basically going to be the length of it, or I guess the strain is sort of a permanent. And so now you're in a situation where you basically have shifted the graph here. Now, what advantage would you have to actually stretching it out to that point? From an engineering point of view,
It would then be a linear increase all the way up to the point where it's gonna start to fail.
right, so when do you want that?
For rupture discs or for something that,
Say ruptured disc, I'm picturing spines.
Yeah.
So,
there's you know how fuses work, right?
yep,
There's a pneumatic version of that, a hydraulic and pneumatic version of that, where there's a disc that will break at when things exceed a certain pressure.
okay,
So that's kind of that's the closest example I could think of for something that's engineered to fail. It's a sacrificial device
okay.
to prevent the system from being destroyed. There's also a galvanic anodes, which are to protect against galvanic corrosion.
All right, so a case where you want it to fail, but you could also, I mean, this plastic ring will fail. Read my mind, come on. Oh, we'll just do it, any other examples, how about that way? Something less related to the failure aspect of it, but more about what happens here.
Forging heat treating metals.
How so?
How so? You soften it up to the point that you soften the metal up, and then you actually, I don't know what I'm talking about, unfortunately.
Okay.
In any application where you need something, like, for the sword example, you don't want a sword to bend and then be, like you would rather it, when it's gonna fail, just have it fail. So getting that extra little bit of predictable strength out of it.
What about car tires? How they expand in the heat and shrink in the cold, but they don't deform or break? Is that?
Actually, I hadn't thought about tires. I was thinking more along the lines, I wasn't thinking sort of specifically, but more along the lines of what Richard was saying. But the tires would basically stay within the elastic limit, that when you removed the heat in this particular case, they should go back to basically the shape they were in before.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was thinking of, swords and whatnot, but you explained it better than
It
me.
wouldn't deform any further. It would just break.
Yeah. The case where I have seen it was this building of the St. Louis Arch, where you don't want it to, basically you have the rebars which stay stretched to that point right there, so that, you build your arch, you don't want the arch suddenly looking like this at some point just because the bars continue to bend. So you get the extra strength, as was mentioned, without really, there's no plastic deformation unless that thing is just failing. I'm suddenly picturing though, I mean, you've got a monument that will, it's looking great or the thing is killing people, so I guess you make the call. But since people are in it, the thing's probably designed for 100 times what it should. Plus it's right near the New Madrid Fault, so you gotta watch out for the earthquakes. Or now you have to watch out for the fact my daughter lives there. Questions to hear? Yes, come.
Does the temperature affect the graph? The temperature?
I suspect it will. I actually haven't looked into that, but if you're definitely, if you take it to an extreme, you can melt metal. So at some point, the thing becomes much more pliable. It requires less force
Yes.
to plastically deform it.
You need a 3D graph.
So I would assume that it would be shorter this way.
I would,
I would assume it'd do something like that if you heat it up.
yeah.
You got a different speculation?
I wonder if the plastic deformation would be a longer thing. Because when it's, but then I don't know, because it would dial back the total amount as well. If it's hot.
I would not be surprised. I also might be material dependent.
Yeah, I imagine.
And someone mentioned a 3D graph. It might exist out there. That's not something I've dealt with.
I think he was joking, but I think he was joking about having a third axis, but
No, I suddenly pictured the third axis, that one with temperature.
It looks like it'll be a pain in the butt to look at, though.
You'd have to use some software that you could slice and then view individual sections.
Oh, right.
That is VR. I guess a sign of my age. I was not thinking software.
If I can find something, I'll send it over.
I appreciate that.
I'm sure it exists in the world of like racing technology and stuff. I can't keep up with it a little bit, so.
All right, so back to the actual textbook. So this obviously has a slope here. When you're talking about Hooke's law, it's called the spring constant. When you're talking about stress and strain, this is now called Young's modulus. Or the modulus of the elasticity. Now, the symbol used, the two main symbols used, are E or Y. And right now, I forget which one your book uses. They use a Y. My notes flip back and forth between E and Y, so just recognize they are the same thing here. Now, as I take this rod and I stretch it out, as long as I don't go into the plastic deformation, I'm still within this nice linear relationship here. There is an official definition about what's acceptable with plastic deformation, you still call it elastic. Not everything is really a straight line, sometimes it will curve a little bit, and so now the question comes in, well, if it's curving, what's considered the elastic region? Generally, the elastic region is within a strain of I think it's 0.002. 0.2%. That's still considered to be the elastic region if it's not a straight line. But because this is a classroom and we're doing physics, we are going to assume a nice ideal straight line. So as I take this and I pull it and it stretches a little bit, other things are going to happen. We're in the elastic region, but what else most likely is going to happen to this metal bar as I make it longer?
It's gonna get, the cross section's gonna get thinner towards the middle.
Even within the elastic region, if I pull it this way, I have a certain number of atoms here. I can't suddenly just create matter by pulling on it. These typically are going to go in for the standard. And so we have not only stretching this way, but we have shrinking going in this direction. And so that's known as transverse strain. That's lots of T. As opposed to what we were talking about here, which is longitudinal. Generally, it's understood longitudinal if you don't put the word in front of it, but transverse you do need to specify. So as my stress increases, the transverse strain should increase, or actually will become more negative. And so there's yet one more relationship we can talk about here, known as Poisson's ratio. And of course, we don't feel like writing that out, so we come up with a symbol, and it is the nu, the Greek letter nu. Now, the way textbooks and websites will write a nu, sometimes they look exactly like a V. My nus look like a V with a high wind on it.
So transverse strain is Poisson's ratio.
No, I'm about to get to it. This is the ratio of the transverse strain over the longitudinal stress. Oh, wait.